Electric Cafe.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Electric Cafe. Today I wanted to have a little bit of a discussion and talk a little bit about Record Store Day. Just my thoughts in general about the day, why I don't really participate in Record Store Day. But I also want to talk a little bit about my thoughts from the record store perspective, from the customer's perspective, from a collector's perspective, and just the whole day in general. And I want to talk a little bit about the Record Store Day submission process, which I did email Record Store Day to see what sort of the criteria is and what you need to do to get your record into Record Store Day. And then maybe I'd like to brainstorm a little bit on, maybe some of the issues about it, but just maybe what could be better about the day. I think the day is a good idea. I think Record Store is a good idea originally, and just in general, going to support your local record store and buy great music seems like the perfect idea. Ever since I was about 10 years old in 1986, I've been going to record stores. I've spent so much time at shopping and really enjoyed the thrill of the hunt and finding great music, whether it be in the new bin or the used bin or the imports. I've just spent so much time at record stores. It's been such an enjoyable experience. I really treasure that experience, and I felt, especially as the lean years happened of like 2005, 2006, I really felt bad for the next generation that they weren't going to possibly go into a record store and not have that great experience that my generation and the previous generations had. It's just such a rewarding experience to shop and not know it's there and come home with some great music. And I thought that the future generations wouldn't be able to really experience that because so many record stores were closing. I felt the obligation to want to try to think of some way that I could help. And in 2006, I thought I was a heavy user of Discogs, and I wanted to come up with an idea to help promote the record stores. And so I came up with a sub-forum in Discogs called International Record Store Index. And the idea of what I had was making threads or posts with each city, each major city in each country. And those would be basically curated and kept up to date by hopefully somebody in that area. And I wanted to make this a little bit more in depth than just the address and what records they have. I wanted to make a great experience for the person if they were coming out of town. So like if you were from Philadelphia and you went to San Francisco and you looked into that thread, you would see what record stores and where they're at, but you'd also see what kind of records they have, their prices, what their owner's names was of the record store. How many hours would you expect to be shopping there? Where's a place to get a good sandwich there? Where's a place to get a good beer there? Is it close to a music venue? Is it how's the public how's the public transit? How do you get there? What's the best way? Was it a taxi? Was it take the metro? Like I wanted it to be like a great experience for somebody who was coming in out of town to that city, and make it as easy as possible and as smooth as possible, so that person could spend the most time of their day record shopping. A lot of times, especially in those days, and that's always been a big thing for me. When I would go to San Francisco, I would go to New York, I would go to Philadelphia, Florida, every place that I would travel. I would just kind of look through the directory and see what record stores are out there, and I would just go find there. And if I had a place like this that I wanted to create, you could be like, okay, well, I got a data record shop. I think I can hit this record store, and you could sort of plan a trip, and you would have an idea of what you could spend at each store and what you would want to look for, and then where you could get a sandwich in between or a beer, and just make the record shopping as enjoyable as possible. And that was really the idea of the International Record Store Index, which I started on Discogs back in 2006. And because of the format of the Discogs forums and stuff like that, and the post not being able to edit past 365 days, some of the threads went dormant. And I thought of this idea a couple years before applications came out Cell phones came out in 2007, 2008 with applications, and then by then I kind of, was on to different things, and I kind of forgot about the idea. Unfortunately, the forum kind of died, and strangely enough, there's still 7,000 members of that sub forum, and still like one of the biggest sub forums. But it's a shell of what I hoped the forum could be, and I really wanted it to be a lot more, but I just didn't have maybe the wherewithal or the thought process, or really I was just kind of bummed out because of not being able to do it on Discogs is where I had most of my connections, where my friends were, and all those things. And so just things didn't work out, and I went off to do other things. But strangely enough, Discogs picked that up, and then they started doing that, a record store thing to promote record stores, and started to do that. But that was kind of after the fact, and then they shut it down a couple years ago. But I really wanted to support the record stores. That was the main thing, because I wanted them to be open so I could travel to them, to other people could travel them. And I know as the population of people shopping for records was dwindling, we needed all those people to hit as many shops as possible. And I really wanted that for the hardcore vinyl buyers that were left and hitting a lot of the used record stores. Once 2010 came around, I really started to see the reissue market pick up. And of course, 2008, the Record Store Day started up that, and that sort of took over. But I didn't put too much thought process into how the store was. I wasn't really too interested with it. I knew it was kind of more of a popular thing for like major labels and people that were into necessarily popular music and rock music. It didn't really seem like it was there to support the record stores, which was fine and all, but it wasn't really necessarily to cater to maybe the hardcore record buyers, because they were already going, right? I mean, there's no reason to bring out underground music when they're already coming, right? They're going to bring out the more popular records and things like that. And so I really never wanted to support Record Store Day, even though I wanted to support the record stores. And my only two experiences of record stores, I went one time in 2012, and it was an okay experience. I can't remember what I bought, which is really strange. I might have not bought anything, because I can't remember what I bought. And then I went in 2017, and in 2012 I started to see some traffic, and then 2017, I was there at like 4 in the morning, and I was like 30th in line, and I was like, wow, this is kind of crazy. But I kind of expected that because I knew how the day was coming. And so I went and got my coffee and sat out at 4 a.m. and just kind of, shoot the shit with other record collectors. And that was actually the best part of the day. The experience of being, slowly gone through a line and see the records in front of you and then kind of be exited out the door. It didn't seem really special, and it didn't really seem like something I ever wanted to partake in. But every year I go back into the Record Store Day, and I like to see what's coming out and see, oh, well, if I was there, what would I buy? And seems like every year I struggle to look at like 2 or 3 records. And the day doesn't really support a lot of electronic music, that's for sure. And it doesn't seem to support a lot of smaller labels. So I wanted to look into that process. So now I'd like to review the record store submission process. So me as a small label, I have a release coming up that I was interested in possibly putting in Record Store Day, because it's a little bit more towards a balance of rock music and electronic music. And I thought it'd be a release if I was ever going to be in Record Store Day, have one of my labels in Record Store Day being featured, whether it be national or regional. What does it entail to get a release into Record Store Day, right? Because not only did I want to see from my label, but I was curious what it takes in the submission process and the approval process in getting your release into Record Store Day. So I got sent back an Excel spreadsheet in what I'm supposed to fill out. And so I wanted to go over that just a little bit, what I needed to fill out. And most of these are very obvious things. First is the distributor and the title of the person submitting that. So I would put my name there, and probably my label, and maybe my distributor. Then it has the label, the artist, the title of the Record Store Day piece, or just the title, the complete description, the format that it comes on. Is it CD, is DVD, is 12-inch, 7-inch, 10-inch, 12-inch, yada yada. Then you put in the UPC number, so the barcode number. Then you put in the sale retail price, and then you put in the wholesale retail price, or wholesale cost. And then you put in the track listing. And then there's this big box. It says, is this permanently exclusive? So is this going to be a record that will never come out anywhere else, right? If not, describe the release in detail how this record store piece will differ from the version. So this is probably one of the most important boxes you could put. And it has some examples in here. Is the record numbered? Does it feature an alternate cover? These are just examples of what makes the release special for a record store day. Is it a unique colored variant? If so, what color is it? Does it have an insert, right? So it's mostly graphic stuff. It doesn't even really talk about the music. It's really more about the product, which is interesting, but it does have a place for track lists. So I'm sure they would probably do their research and see how exclusive it is. And also there's a description box. So I would, if it was a live recording, obviously it'd probably be the only live recording of that recording if I was the label owner or related to the artist, yada yada. And then there's a couple more boxes. If some or all of the content was previously available, explain how and where. So they're trying to see how exclusive it is for Record Store Day. And then they want to know how many of the records are being made in America, how many are being made in Canada, and then how many are being pressed worldwide. Also, it has a question mark for artwork provided question, which I'm not sure what that means. Artwork provided. I guess maybe send them pictures of the artwork. I don't know if what that mean. And then the last couple of boxes. Which one-stops will be used? Alliance, AMS, or Ingram. Those are examples. I think those might be local distribution points. I'm not sure on that one. And then it says confirm sending 3 copies of that release for their record store archives. And it has an address here in North Carolina that you're supposed to send 3 copies of that record to Record Store Day. And then the last thing, please list artist, social media, which will promote this piece if accepted. So that's the Record Store Day process of submitting a release to be reviewed for inclusion of Record Store Day. Now, when I got this back and I saw this, I emailed back and I asked them, I said, do you need to have a certain quantity to be eligible for either regional or a national record store day? I wanted to see, is it 5,000 copies? Is it 10,000? How small are we looking at here? Can a label that presses 500 records be included in Record Store Day, even if it's regional, maybe even just in the state? They didn't get back to me on that. So maybe I'll inquire again, and maybe they just were busy and didn't see that. Maybe they didn't want to answer that. I'm not sure. But, that's going to be the end-all question for me because I'm a smaller label. I'm probably going to press 500 copies. I don't know if that's worth it for them to really have part of the list. So does Record Store Day really promote the smaller labels because I don't press enough? I don't know. You know what I mean? It doesn't look like it. That's why you have the releases that you have at Record Store Day. Every day is Record Store Day to me. I don't necessarily need one day to tell me when to go shopping. I know this is more for the people that, maybe they want these special releases that come out, or maybe they feel like it's kind of a fun thing to do and sort of have that like Black Friday feel where they stand outside and get a TV. That's not really me. I've never been that hardcore. Nothing's been really that urgent to stand in line for. And sure, I have a lot of unreleased and limited releases, but I think the way to curb that fear of missing out or that fear of not getting what you want is really to be well-rounded and like a lot of different styles of music. Like, I could see if I was only into one genre and I had maybe 10 favorite artists and I missed out on one of the release, I'd probably be pretty bummed, but I like hundreds and hundreds of artists. I don't even know where to count. I follow so many labels, in electronic music and other styles of music that if I miss out on something, big deal. Maybe I'll get it used somewhere else. I just don't see the urgency in having to get something at that day. And I don't think the second thing is I don't think the releases that come out that day are that special. If they did, they would probably come out another day. And that's the strange thing about Record Store Day, is you think by now, having there been 16 years of Record Store Day, that artists or labels would specifically have their release come out on that day, a new release. But it doesn't seem that way. They seem to come out on other days and, whenever. They don't seem to wait for Record Store Days. But what does come out on Record Store Days? Them putting out live albums or B-sides or demos or unreleased stuff. It seems kind of, it's just kind of questionable. It's just, it's not a necessity. Demo versions aren't ideal. Live albums, that not everybody's really into live albums. Unreleased music was probably unreleased for a reason, and it's not that great. There's a lot of reasons why a lot of those releases that come out on Record Store, they aren't that exciting. A picture disc, a new colored vinyl. Oh, it's got a new artwork on it. Just some of this stuff doesn't really interest a lot of collectors, and I guess that's why, Record Store Day is more for the newer collector of records or the new person getting into record, or maybe the person who's more into popular music, because a lot of the releases just aren't, in certain genres, that's for sure. It seems like it's more into rock genres for sure. I just can't think on how many times where I was like, oh, I gotta have the demo version, or I love the demo version better than the original. It's just extra material. The second thing about the day is, like a lot of people, complain about, is does the day encourage scalping and the proliferation of the format and the secondhand prices on vinyl? You guys probably have all seen it. Something comes out on Record Store Day, and then you see it that day or the next day posted online for 3 times the price, and you decide whether that's too expensive or not if you didn't go. That's never happened to me, and that's probably because of the releases that come out that day, but I don't give in to that stuff. There's so much music to buy. If something is crazy priced, I can count on one hand how many times I bought a record over $60. Like, my limit is like $56. I might go to that, but I can count on one hand how many times I've gone over 50, 60 bucks for a record, and it's been a long time for that. So I'm not, and this excludes certain box sets, that might be in the $80, $90 range or so. But just as far as like a single, double, or triple album, I've never, one hand how many times I've spent over $50 or $60 on a record. But how do you guys feel about the secondhand market when it comes to Record Store Day? Does it upset you? Is it just part of collecting? Is it just how it is, and that's how it is with things that people want, and people go in there and buy it and then sell it online? Is it that simple? Does it irk you anyway? I think it's, I'm kind of indifferent to it. I'm kind of numb to it, but I've been around it for a long time, having been on Discogs for 24 years now. For those that don't know, I used to be an editor and moderator on Discogs back in 2001 to 2004. So I was, it was the owner, and I was one of the top 4 or 5 editors, on Discogs. And then we had about 60 or 70 moderators, I think, back in like 2002. And that was sort of the one of the first, I think that was like version 3 or something like that of the website, of the format of the website. It was very early on. The marketplace didn't come into about 2006 or 2007, so this is 4 or 5 years before the record marketplace started, when I was an editor on there. I can remember when I got to Discogs, and I can see some of my names on some of the releases that I added. They were in the 20,000 range, and now there's probably upwards of almost 20 million records submitted on there. But back in that day, I can remember submitting and being around number 20,000. So I was way back in the early days of Discogs. The other reason why I don't really support record stores is a little bit due to something maybe not supported record that's not really related to Record Store Day, but in general, and it's one of my cruxes with record stores, and it's not their fault, but it's just the times. I much rather enjoy shopping and searching and digging in a used vinyl store versus a new record store that just has new records. And I get it. Like back in 2004, everybody's coming with their records to the record store and selling them, and so they're. I remember the local. So they're all used. They're all used, right, in the store. There was a time there was. Shout out to CD Seller, in Northern Virginia when I lived in Northern Virginia from 2003 to like 2020, 2021. And that was one of my favorite places to shop. And it was mostly a CD store, but they had a lot of vinyl too. And you could tell when they bought somebody's collection because it would just come out and I'd be really excited to go in there. But back in like 2000, like I was a big supporter of that store. There was times when I would go into that record store and David, my good friend David, who works at that store, is the co-owner of that store, would tell you there were times when I would go in there and 3, 4 p.m., I'd be the only one in that record store. And I'd be shopping for a couple hours, and I would come out with like a stack of CDs, and I'd be happy as all get out. But there was really not much vinyl, and there was maybe about 1,000 records in the store. This is like maybe like 2008, 2009. And so it was called CD Seller, in fact, so they didn't really even carry that much vinyl. And then sort of as the years went on, you started to see more vinyl because people were starting to sell their vinyl a lot. And so the record store, that CD Seller, was basically probably about 95. I would probably even go as far as say 99% of it was used. All it was used, right? And this is before the reissue market really sprang up in like 2010, 2012. And so it was so much fun shopping at those record stores because you never knew what you were going to come into. It's so much more fun shopping and digging through a used record store than it is a new one. Like, and I'm not talking about the used record. I'm talking about well-organized ones. I'm not talking about the ones where you're climbing over stuff and trying to get stuff and it's just a mess and you just feel sorry for all this vinyl and there's some good deals in there, but you don't want to break your back, and they don't have air conditioning in there. It's 100 degrees in the summer, and you're digging through the vinyl. Like, I'm not talking about those stores. I'm talking about the ones that are fairly organized and they buy and sell a lot of used vinyl. Those are the kind of stores that I want to support. Those are the kind of stores that I want to dig in. I just don't find that much interest or fun shopping in a store that has 95% new music. Like, and not to put anybody on blast, but I would go into a record store, I'm not going to name the name, but you'd go into the record store and I saw Susie and the Banshees Rapture, which it was just reissued in 2018 or so, $38. And then I look on Amazon on my phone and I see it for $31, and I already have Prime, and so it could be on my doorstep tomorrow for $31 versus buying it right here for $38. So I go on and get it shipped to my house. I don't understand going to record stores and buying new vinyl anymore with the advent of the internet. In the 80s and 90s, you went to New Music and they had a pamphlet up front, if it was like Warehouse Music or Tower Records or Sam Ash or Amoeba or whatever the record store was, and you would see the pamphlet, or you would just walk around and you see the new bins and you see the used and you see the imports and you'd be excited and you go around a little bit of everything and you spend a couple hours there, right? Because you hadn't been there for like a week or two. And you wanted to see all the new releases. You knew the releases came in on Tuesday, right? So it was just like, that was exciting for the time, but let's be honest, like, we all have really busy lives. We all have a lot of stuff going on. We all can't make it to the record stores. They're not around the corner like they used to be. They're not like Blockbuster Video. The closest record store for me right now is about 15-minute drive. Not a big deal, but it's not around the corner either like some of the record stores used to be back in the day. And so, you're online, you get an email about it, you click on Amazon, it's at how do they compete with that, right? So, and you're going to charge more. I get you need to charge more because the margins is what it is, but for me as a buyer, I'm just gonna buy. So my point is, like, what's the excitement about going to a record store that doesn't really support used vinyl? They don't carry used vinyl, and you're going to see a bunch of reissues there of stuff that you knew was probably going to be there, and stuff that you probably could have shopped online. Like, that's the crux I have with supporting some of these record stores. It's not like I don't want them to succeed or I don't enjoy shopping for records. It's just it's online too. So I'd rather support used record stores, and Record Store Day is just not a day that I support. I don't like the releases that usually come out, and I don't. The other thing is I don't really feel like being treated like cattle and sort of being prodded along the line and having to pick what's there, and if I miss out and this guy picks the record I want, and then I gotta be like all bummed and stuff. It just doesn't seem like a day that's conducive to a happy record buying experience. And that's what it's all about, right? You want to enjoy shopping for records. And Record Store Day is just not a day that really supports the customer, in my opinion. It might support the Record Store Day, it might support smaller labels and rare releases and maybe smaller artists and unique, you know what I mean? But it's really not a customer appreciation day, that's for sure. Like, I don't feel appreciated when I get prodded through the line and, sort of pick stuff, and you know what I mean. Like, you've been there, you know how it is. Like, you've been waiting since 4 a.m. It's cold outside. Like, I don't see much enjoyment in the day. The other thing I wanted to talk about, when it comes to Record Store Day is it puts a lot of pressure on record plants and smaller labels, and I've seen it in the past, and hopefully it's changing with with more record plants coming out, and them running 24/7 because the business is good and stuff like that. But there was a time for a couple of years there, and it's still probably relative. But a lot of times on these record store days, these record plants, because record stores coming out, they get an order for we need to make 50,000 metal. I've worked at record plants and seen record plants that do that. All the Metallica releases were reissued in Northern Virginia at this record plant down the street from me, and though one in Arlington, and they had an order for probably close to like 200,000 Metallica records that they were selling for, because Metallica had a deal with selling their records at I think it was Walmart, and so they needed to make a big order. And what happens to all the small labels records and everybody else's who are expecting their record to be made, right? They get pushed to the back, they wait longer, right? So it wasn't ideal. As me as who pressed records in the past and ran a label, and waited 2-3 months for their records to get made, it kind of sucked. And then you think about, like, why am I waiting so long, for my record to get pressed? And then you think about, like, who's jumping the line because they have a big order. Oh, those were the same labels that gave up on vinyl 20 years ago. Oh, okay, yeah. Go ahead, go in first in line. Go ahead, press your 50,000 Phil Collins records when you guys sold 6 million of them, and there's still ones in the used bins in these record stores over here that don't get supported. You could go buy a used record of that Phil Collins studio for $5. Oh, you're gonna press 20,000 of them and sell them for 30. Oh, why my release waits on deck for another couple months, right? Like, that's you can see how, like, a small record label would feel getting pushed around like that. We're a lot of the ones, like, especially in the electronic music community and the DJ community, we were the ones that were supporting the industry when nobody else was, except for maybe like punk and hardcore, who stayed true to the 7-inch vinyl, who stayed true to vinyl. Hip hop jumped ship, and they were one of the original ones that started with scratching and stuff like that in the hip hop community and dance music and stuff like that. But so most of everybody else jumped ship when it comes to buying records, but not the hardcore vinyl electronic community. Not the house community, not the techno community. We were still buying vinyl, and through the lean years, and we helped keep record plants open and a lot of record stores open. So not like we're owed anything, not like we feel special, but to be kicked aside and pushed aside, and our releases that we want to get, being pushed to the back while they make reissues of Taylor Swift, doesn't feel good to us. So, that's the sidebar of the whole, these big pushes for Record Store Day and getting those records pressed with a lot of artists and labels that 5 years ago didn't care about records, and selling vinyl, but now they want to do it because it's the cool thing. It's just it feels a little bit like a slap in the face to us, but it also feels, I would think it feels a little hard to the record stores, also that went through some extremely lean years of trying to stay open while all those artists, you know, put their music online, put their music on CD, and now they think it's hip and like, oh, now we want to sell records in your stores. Like, you know what I mean? Like, so that's kind of, not a big part of it, but it is kind of like, it does feel like the Record Store Day to me has a bad taste in my mouth because it's involved in all that. When you think of Record Store Days and the releases that get to Record Store Days, right? Mostly bigger labels. So it doesn't really, Record Store doesn't really cater to record labels that are smaller. It might cater towards artists that are smaller if they happen to be picked up by a medium to large label, but, it's really not catered towards the smaller record stores. So you're not going to see a lot of smaller, special, maybe unknown, or you're going to find a new artist on Record Store Day that that you may have never heard of, right? It's going to be your normal Daryl Hall and John Oates or Green Day or Taylor Swift or, stuff like that, right? It's going to be their popular stuff, and it's going to be some, questionable releases, right? So that's kind of why, that's a lot of reasons and a little bit of the discussion that's on my head when it comes to Record Store Day. Those are the things I think about. I'd love to support Record Store Day. I love to support record stores, but I support them all the time as much as I can, especially depending on what they carry, depending on how they treat me when I go in there, right? It depends on the prices. So there's a lot of things like that. And it's an interesting thing to think about, like supporting some of these record stores as record stores start opening up more and more, it seems like, and which is great. We love having more record stores. And I hope they all do well, and I hope they do well on days like this. Like, I totally want record stores to do well on Record Store Day. Take advantage of the people that want to buy that stuff. It's just not a day that is comfortable for me as a buyer. It's not a day that really directs releases towards the hardcore buyers. And it's just not, it's just not a day that really kind of like caters to me. One thing that I have, they need to have a used record store day, a day to support used record store days, and have 30-40% off, or they're saving 2,000 used records that they bought from a hardcore collector, and they're gonna feature it out on that day and put it all out on that day. This is used record store day. Like, that's what needs to happen for me to get excited. Like, that would be a cool day to go to a store and dig. Like, I'm interested in buying music from collectors. Like, I may not be always happy with collectors' prices because they might be higher than normal, but I know they've taken care of the records generally on average more, and I know they have more particularly good music in the vein that you're looking for if you know that they collected in a certain genre, so there's advantages there. But it's just we need other ideas to make the day special. How about a discount on used records when you go into that day? The two times that I went into Record Store Day, the used record section was not mentioned or not highlighted, and there was really no special that day. Why not? Why don't you want your other customers to go through your new record store line and then delve off into the used record collections? Why don't you say 10% off on all used records that days. All used records that day. I'm sure maybe some stores to do, but I think there needs to be like a national thing. Like if we're going to do a national record store day for new records, there needs to be some sort of national day for used record stores. I don't have the time and the patience to help it, but I will support it in whatever I can do. But I just want to throw out the idea because we need to support used record store. Yeah, so those are some of my thoughts about record store day in general, and my just my overall experience with it, my thoughts about it. I'm curious to know what your thoughts are about record store days and what your experiences are. What do you like and what do you dislike about the day, and maybe some thoughts on what could make the record store day better. But yeah, thanks for your time and your support with the channel. I really appreciate your time in watching this, and hopefully it was some food for thought, and hopefully you got something from this. And if not, hopefully my next video will.
Cafe.